Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Blizzard just made a huge post about how they're effectively just going to save M+, and everything is going to be joyous in the world, and I really think that they've nailed it with these changes. So we're going to go over them real quick, talk about why they're so important, and why I think that this could be probably the best M+ season we're going to be getting in a while, and not actually be hyperbole. All right? Trust me. So they really identified one of the major issues for why people just don't know what the heck they're doing in dungeons, as they mentioned how a lot of the rewards are just not quite balanced properly. They lay out this scenario where people are going into delves, they're doing all the gear that they can, they're going and getting all the gear they can out of the delve system, and then they don't have the experience really for the dungeons themselves because they're entering at a level that's going to give them gear, because why the heck would you do lower dungeons that are not giving you any gear? Problem is, M+ was so freaking brutal that people are getting annihilated in 7s and just having an awful time because you have people without experience who have not done the dungeons consistently enough to learn the mechanics because they were, just doing solo delves, and then this was the next thing on the track. And so what they're doing is they're trying to align what is giving you good stuff versus the sort of progression path you need to take for it to be successful. So once you're done with delves, you're actually going to be going into Mythic Plus, getting good rewards from the beginning, and not getting smacked down in the face and have some super difficult content. A couple of things that were smacking you in the mouth were things like Challenger's Peril, adding the extra timers to your deaths. That's now getting moved, and they're now shuffling around a lot of the affixes we'll go over in just a second. But they also talk about how important it is to have this 2 to 6 level key range to really allow people to learn, understand the dungeons, do them. Literally everybody is learning these dungeons by doing them, and it's not like anybody's super special or whatever. But if you're not rewarding people for doing those keys, they're not going to learn at the low level, and they might brick a high level key because they're not experienced. So let's go over the actual chart in terms of what they're doing. They're making it so that Mythic 0 is giving you better gear than before. They're making it so that a 2 doesn't have any affix. It just has a timer. A 3 doesn't have any affix. It's still just a timer. Then Xal'atath's Bargain gets added at a 4. Fort and Tyrannical added at a 7. The other option at the 10. And then 12, while it's called Guile, this is actually turning into Challenger's Burden. So there's no more technically Challenger's Peril, I guess is what it's called. But this actually starts at the level 12. That means that the actual punishment for dying is going to be at really the sweat zone, basically. When you're at a level, when you're at 12s, people should know the mechanics to the encounters. They should know how deadly they are. But at the exact same time, there's not an increase in enemy HP that adds this extra layer to making things even more brutal. So they're trying to do what they can to sort of bring down the nasty plus 12 wall that you're fighting up against. And so they even mentioned, while the mechanics could feel overly punishing for groups still learning and progressing towards gear rewards, a focus on clean execution remains appropriate for the upper echelons of the system, and removing the extra 10% stats should make the transition into the prestige tiers of the system feel like less of a wall. So they want it to be difficult, and I think it's fair to have 12s be difficult, because if you look at the chart, right, your end of dungeon rewards end at a 10, and your vault rewards aren't getting any better, right, at 12s. You're just getting more gilded crests. So there should be a higher expectation for, knowing mechanics, knowing what the heck you're doing, while at the same time allowing people to gear more easily and gear really more steadily throughout the M+ process, and actually start going up through the ranks, with a reasonable assumption that your 0s and 2s and 3s should be timed and give you some decent gear and not just, kind of be awful. But perhaps one of the biggest reasons, you might say that, hey, this is all well and good, but why would this be the M+ season that's going to be better than anything ever before? Well, I'll tell you. So they're making it so that keys don't deplete. But there's a little more to that, all right? Originally, they were saying, hey, if you hit 2850, keys under 12 will not deplete. Well, yay, huzzah, that helps a lot of people. But they're now changing it so that once you have chested every dungeon in that season, all 8 dungeons at X level, you will no longer de-level below that level. So if you timed all 12s, their keystone no longer automatically de-levels below a 12. Once a player's timed all 13s, the new floor will be 13, and so on for all of those keys. You can still de-level those keys as much as you like, but Now they're making it so that as you're rising through the ranks and progressing into the dungeons, your keys aren't going to be depleting, and you don't have to have that additional sort of like stress of like wasting your dungeon in a pug group or anything along those lines. So that way, they're making it so it's a comparable level of challenge and prestige for the higher dungeons, and you don't have to worry about getting the achievement or anything like that just to be able to have that option as well. So I like that they're changing the rating to 3K since they are making some of the key levels like a little bit lower. And then perhaps one of the biggest things that I like about this is that when people sign up for dungeons, they're always going to be worried about like bricking their key or wasting it, and then you have to do lower keys and all of this other stuff. But now you can actually kind of treat M Plus a little bit like rating, where you can, let's say you have a 13 and you've timed all of these 12s and everything like that before, and you say, okay, let's go and try to progress this dungeon. If it depletes, it's unfortunate, but it'll only go so low as a 12, and then we can make sure we get it done on 12, and we can go from there. And it's actually going to kind of turn into progressing the dungeons a little bit further. So progression keys might be a little bit challenging still, that you only have your one shot at a 13, and then you kind of have to move on. But what I like about it is it's going to be really valuable for a group or a team to have a 12 and let's say a 13, or a 14 and a 15 if their floor is 14 or something like that, where you can sit there and just kind of grind out, that higher level key, you can grind out that base level key. So if your floor right now is a 12, you can just grind it out, make sure everybody understands what the heck's going on, especially those who haven't done the dungeon as much at that level, since it's only, if it's your key, then that means, hey, it's not going to deplete below the 12. And then it also is going to make it easier to start progressing into the next level of keys, because once you've seen the strategy, once you've seen the setup in mind, you can run it a couple times without worrying about depleting, and then you can go right back into the higher level dungeon, know what you're doing, and then play to win. I love this. I'm a huge fan of it, and I think it's also going to be really valuable for getting people to kind of like mix around and play with each other a little bit more, because there's going to be less threat of like wasting your key. And there's a lot of times where if I as a healer have already timed all 14s, but my buddy really needs this 14, but he hasn't really done it before, you can actually just sit there, and since I'm the key holder, we can continuously be progressing this dungeon together, and then they're going to get the experience, they're going to learn, and it's basically like you're logging in to start progressing these dungeons. It's going to be really nice to see. Certainly for people who want to sell dungeons, it's going to be really nice, because you're going to have a couple attempts at making sure you chest that 12 for somebody who wants to get that 3K achievement as well. And I think one of the most fun things about raiding is actually being able to smash your face into a difficult objective with your friends and then go to complete it. The challenge with raiding is there's so many times where it sort of just feels like a freaking job, because you need to get everybody together, you need to get everybody on at the same time, you got to log in at the same times, at the same place, all of this stuff, and it can get really frustrating. But when you only have to do it with 5 players, you can easily pick up somebody and you can easily game with them, which I think is going to be super fun. I will say that there's going to be quite a few areas where you may have some people get kind of boosted up by this system, and you might want to be like, I don't expect it to fully solve the issue of people being more choosy. Where do they talk about that? Basically, like players being more wary and more selective in filling their groups. That might still happen if your key is able to be depleted, right? But then I think that you're going to notice a lot of times where there will be groups that'll form up and say, hey, I'm trying to get my buddy his last 12 so that his keys will no longer deplete. I'm making this group. My key will not deplete. Come to the group, commit to grinding this out, and let's go get it. I'm very excited about that, and I hope it's kind of a return to a little bit more of like a community emphasis of like, let's work together for this objective, because you even see it all the time with like raiding and heroic raiding and everything. You go into the pub groups, one death or one wipe or something, and a bunch of people just start leaving. I really hope that this is sort of a catalyst to sort of encourage people to sit there and start grinding it out, and also learning with other people. Also, Jam, thank you for the sub as well. He says, hi, YouTube. And there definitely needs to be something in the LFG where you can kind of like mark that your key is not going to deplete, or that it will deplete, because that's going to be a big deal when it comes to a lot of the group selection. So yeah, it'll be nice if somebody is kind of like breaking into a higher plane, and then they're kind of bringing up other people with them because their keys are not going to deplete at the same time. But there's also going to be those moments where, oh, if you don't communicate that your key could get bricked, it could get bricked by somebody doing a dumb play, and that could also be a huge issue as well. So I kind of would love to see this done alongside some kind of system to actually hold like levers accountable for it, but I'm not quite sure how they're gonna successfully do it without it being like really, really heavily abused. I do love that they're getting rid of the extra health and the extra stats and stuff like that with the Guile. I love how they're making the progression curve a lot smoother, a lot more rewarding. There's another mount that you get for hitting 3K in addition to, I think it's 2,500. So lots of good changes coming. And beyond that, not only is Blizzard listening when we cry and moan and everything like that all the time, but they're also listening to a lot of like the data and everything that the competitive WoW community and a lot of people have been posting about M+ representation, how much they've been playing. This stuff really seems to matter a lot to Blizzard, and I'm glad at least that they're making some of these changes. So it's awesome. I'm hyped about it. I hope you guys are as well. Let me know what y'all think in the comments down below. Big love to our patrons for making all this content possible. Thanks so much for watching. Hope y'all found it helpful, and I'll catch y'all next time.